Dr. Elias Thorne was once a gifted surgeon renowned for saving countless lives, but desperation drove him to the brink when a terminal illness rendered him unable to perform surgeries. One fateful night, as his life ebbed away, a shadowy figure appeared, offering him a chilling deal: unmatched power and eternal life in exchange for blood spilled by his own hands. Desperate, Thorne agreed, unaware of the true price. Reborn with the devil's dark energy coursing through him, Thorne gained unnatural strength and an unsettling charisma that lured others to his cause. He assembled a gang of outcasts, violent, desperate, and loyal to their doctor of death. Under Thorne's control, the gang executed ruthless armed robberies, leaving trails of corpses. Each life taken extended Thorne's existence, and the more fear he sowed, the stronger he grew. The gang's violence became the stuff of legend. Judges, lawmen, and politicians who tried to stop Thorne met horrific ends. Families shattered as Thorne's team ambushed courtrooms, police stations, and even homes. But it wasn't just the physical violence, it was the psychological torment. Survivors reported hearing sinister whispers in the air during attacks, as if hell itself cheered them on. One detective, Marion Cole, uncovered Thorne's pattern of targeting people connected to justice. Despite threats and a string of gruesome murders, Cole launched a manhunt for the doctor. "We have to stop the man who kills to live," he declared, rallying what remained of law enforcement. Thorne's paranoia spiraled into full-blown madness as the law tightened its noose. The faces of his victims began to appear in every shadow, their eyes hollow but accusing, their mouths moving in silent, unending screams. The voices were relentless, echoing in his mind like a cacophony of tortured souls. "Why us? Why me? Do you feel nothing?" they would whisper, each word dripping with sorrow and rage. The devil whispered in his ear, reminding him that his soul would never be free. At night, the walls of his hideout seemed to breathe, pulsating with crimson veins as though his crimes had seeped into the very foundation of the building. He often woke in cold sweats to the feeling of icy fingers brushing his neck or clawing at his arms. "You can never escape us, Thorne," they would hiss. Sleep became a luxury he could no longer afford, his reflection in the cracked mirror a gaunt, spectral version of himself. The devil's presence was worse. "Is this regret I see, Doctor? You knew the cost, yet you bargained anyway." The whispers came from everywhere and nowhere, each syllable a sharp dagger carving his dwindling sanity. He felt an oppressive heat wherever he went, as though hell itself was stalking him. Top gang members abandoned him. Each disappearance was marked by grotesque visions. One saw his own shadow rise and strangle him. Another claimed his reflection laughed maniacally before stepping out of the mirror. Few fled, muttering of curses and doom, unwilling to remain in the presence of a man who now seemed more demon than human. But some loyal ones stay back. Thorne heard the whispers evolve into screams. They called him to the basement, where blood oozed from the walls and pooled at his feet. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like footsteps of something crawling closer. Desperation clawed at him as he realized the truth. The more he killed to extend his life, the closer he brought himself to the devil's fiery grip. And then the knock came. Soft, deliberate, echoing through the mansion like a death knell. Thorne froze. No one could have found him. No one alive, anyway. His gang continued fractured as whispers of betrayal spread. Members feared his unhinged nature, his increasingly erratic decisions, and the demonic aura that clung to him. One by one, they deserted, leaving Thorne alone. Thorne fled to a secluded mansion in the woods, using stolen riches to fortify his lair. As darkness consumed him, he became a shadow of the man he once was, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow, his humanity gone. Detective Cole and a squad of heavily armed officers tracked Thorne to his hideout. The mansion was a house of horrors, with macabre reminders of his crimes, blood-stained walls, stolen mementos from his victims, and journals scrawled with ramblings about immortality. In the final confrontation, Thorne unleashed his full power, slaughtering officers with surgical precision. The fight spilled into the woods, where Cole, wounded but determined, set a trap. Using the voices of Thorne's victims, recordings collected from survivors, he broke the doctor's focus. For the first time, Thorne felt the weight of his sins. The whispers grew deafening, their torment unbearable. As he hesitated, Cole struck the killing blow, plunging a silver blade into Thorne's chest. As Thorne's life faded, the devil reappeared, laughing as he dragged the doctor's soul into the abyss. But the town was far from healed. Families remained broken, and the legend of the Surgeon of Shadows lived on, a chilling reminder of how desperation can turn even the greatest healer into death incarnate. Quick break. If you're enjoying this content, it would mean a lot if you shared this video or recommended our channel to a friend. Word of mouth is everything. It's because of awesome viewers like you that we keep growing. Story number 2. The Doctor Who Played God. Dr. Victor Halloway was a celebrated physician, adored for his charm and trusted for his reputation. But beneath his polished exterior lurked a man consumed by a god complex, driven by an insidious hunger for power over life and death. What no one knew was that Victor thrived not on saving lives, but on ending them, methodically, calculatedly, and in ways no one could suspect. Victor began subtly, a misdiagnosis here, a tampered dose there. He would diagnose treatable ailments as terminal illnesses, relishing the way families fell apart. "It's beyond my control," he'd say solemnly, his voice dripping with false empathy as relatives wept in his office. Each death was a carefully crafted performance. He studied grief with morbid fascination, observing how families reacted: anger, denial, despair. It gave him a thrill nothing else could. Over the years, Victor's work grew bolder. He began targeting specific patients, women he seduced, his ex-wife, even his sister-in-law and her teenage son, hiding their murders behind a veil of professionalism. To Victor, it wasn't murder, it was art. One day, Rose Elms checked into Victor's clinic with persistent headaches. Victor, intrigued by her sharp mind and resilience, diagnosed her with an inoperable tumor. 6 months, he told her coldly. But Rose wasn't like the others. She had come to the clinic not only for her headaches, but because her mother, who had died under Victor's care, had always insisted something about him felt off. Rose started digging. She uncovered irregularities in her mother's records, discrepancies in prescribed medications, and a trail of deaths that seemed unnaturally high. Patients diagnosed by Victor had a pattern of rapid, unexplained decline. The deeper she delved, the more disturbing the picture became. Rose confronted Victor during her follow-up appointment, her heart pounding in her chest. She hid the small recording device in her sleeve, careful not to betray her growing terror as she smiled at him. "I just wanted to ask a few more questions, Dr. Halloway," she began, her voice steady despite the dread twisting in her stomach. Victor leaned back in his chair, the overhead light casting deep shadows across his face. His lips curled into a thin smile. "Of course, my dear. Anything for my patients," he said, his words smooth yet chillingly hollow. As Rose probed about her diagnosis, slipping in carefully worded questions about discrepancies in his records, she saw it, a flicker of irritation. Then something far darker: glee. Victor's charming mask began to slip. His eyes gleamed and his smile twisted into something predatory. "Do you know what it feels like to hold someone's fate in your hands?" he said, his voice low but brimming with exhilaration. He leaned forward, his face inches from hers. "To see the light drain from their eyes because I said it was time? Hundreds, maybe more, all gone because I chose it. Their lives, their deaths, every single one mine." Rose fought the urge to recoil as Victor continued, his voice trembling with a manic delight. "I've watched husbands crumble, wives scream, children beg. Oh, the begging. It's exquisite. Each tear, each scream, it's like a symphony, and I'm the conductor." The room seemed to close in around her. The air was suffocating, and the walls seemed to pulse with an unseen menace. Victor stood abruptly, towering over her. "And you," he hissed, his voice dropping to a whisper, "you've been such a fascinating subject. Your fear, it's intoxicating. But I think it's time to end your chapter, Rose." In that moment, she realized he knew. Her cover was blown. Rose's hand tightened around the recorder, hidden in her sleeve, as Victor reached for a syringe on the desk, his movements deliberate and confident. "You're not leaving this room," he murmured, his tone almost tender. The fluorescent light flickered, casting his shadow across the walls like a monstrous specter. "But don't worry, I'll make it beautiful. You'll be remembered." Adrenaline surged through Rose as she sprang from the chair, shoving the desk between them. Victor's face twisted into something inhuman, his calm demeanor replaced by unhinged fury. "You can't run from me," he snarled, his voice echoing unnaturally. "I am the god of this place." Rose bolted for the door, Victor's laughter ringing out behind her, a sound that would haunt her forever. But what truly terrified Rose was the manic gleam in Victor's eyes as he revealed he had no plans to stop. "I've perfected it, Rose. The police wouldn't know where to start." Rose managed to escape the clinic, barely avoiding Victor's attempt to inject her with a paralytic drug. She fled to the police, armed with her recording. But when authorities arrived at Victor's home, they found it abandoned. In the basement, they discovered a macabre gallery of his work, photographs of his victims, medical files annotated with mocking notes, and a journal cataloging every kill. Victor had disappeared, leaving behind a single note: "You can't stop God." Months later, Victor resurfaced in a small town under a new identity. Rose, now obsessed with stopping him, tracked him down. Their final encounter was nothing short of harrowing. Victor cornered her in an abandoned hospital, the air thick with the smell of decay and disinfectant. As Victor stalked her through the darkened halls, his voice echoed, "You think you're the hero, Rose, but you're just another chapter in my masterpiece." Rose, however, had prepared. She lured Victor into a trap, locking him in a room where she had rigged an anesthetic gas. For the first time, Victor felt what it was like to be powerless. As he drifted into unconsciousness, she whispered, "Even gods fall." Victor was arrested and confessed with chilling detail. He described the joy he felt killing his ex-wife, silencing her after years of bitterness. He spoke of smothering his infant nephew, claiming he was sparing him from the pain of a cruel world. The women he seduced, he said, were purified through death, their secrets buried with them. He was sentenced to life in a psychiatric prison, but his shadow lingered. Rose published a book about her ordeal, hoping to warn the world about those who wear masks of trust. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that Victor's influence remained. And every so often, late at night, she would receive a call. The line would be silent, except for a soft chuckle, followed by a single word, "Soon." Quick pause. Got something on your mind? Leave a question or comment below. YouTube's new features are making it even easier and more rewarding for viewers like you to jump into the conversation. Don't miss out on this chance to connect and share your thoughts. Help us reach more people by sharing this video or recommending our channel to a friend. Your support is what makes this channel possible. Story number 3. The Surgeon's Gambit. Dr. Victor Kane was a name that once commanded respect and admiration. A surgical prodigy who saved countless lives with hands that seemed blessed by fate. But behind the gloved brilliance lay a broken man, cracking under the weight of relentless pressure. Sleepless nights turned to painkillers, and painkillers turned into an addiction that spiraled out of control. The operating room became his stage, but his mind wandered to the dimly lit corners of seedy casinos, where he sought solace in the deceptive thrill of poker games. He was a gambler at heart, reckless and desperate, and the stakes grew with each loss, leaving him drowning in debts owed to dangerous people. The local mafia saw an opportunity in Kane's desperation. They approached him with a chilling proposition: clear his debts by putting his surgical skills to work for them. It was supposed to be temporary, a means to claw his way out of ruin. But Kane quickly found himself descending into a nightmare he couldn't escape. His new patients were living nightmares, informants who needed to be silenced or nameless individuals dragged from dark alleys. Kane's role was macabre: to extract information through excruciating torture, then harvest organs from the still-breathing bodies. The organs disappeared into a lucrative black market, and the bodies dumped like trash. With each surgery, Kane's sanity frayed. His addiction deepened, and the man who once saved lives became a grim reaper for hire. One fateful night, Kane, desperate and reckless, snuck back into the Grand Horizon Casino, a place where his debts had already blacklisted him. Smuggling syringes filled with sedatives, he devised a sinister plan: drug the high-rolling winners and steal their chips. At first, the scheme worked, but his shaky hands and erratic behavior caught the eye of a sharp-witted security guard. A chase through the casino's labyrinthine halls ensued, Kane barely escaping into the night. That night, the whispers about missing winners grew louder, and Kane's face burned in the minds of the casino's security team. The mafia grew restless. Kane's once steady hands, praised for their surgical precision, had become unreliable tremors, his addiction gnawing away at any shred of professionalism he had left. They had invested heavily in his unique talents, harvesting organs and silencing their enemies with macabre efficiency. But now, his mistakes were piling up. A botched procedure here, an untraceable body dumped too publicly there. Their patience wore thin as whispers of Kane's spiraling addiction reached their ears. Kane's mounting debts were like chains, dragging him into increasingly desperate schemes. He began performing surgeries in unsafe, filthy locations, his tools rusty and his mind clouded by drugs. His clientele grew more dangerous and unpredictable, shadowy figures who paid in blood-stained cash or demanded services that chilled even Kane's deteriorating soul. The consequences of his failures became more brutal. A broken finger one day, a bruised rib the next. The Mafia's message was clear: produce results, or your body becomes the next shipment. Kane's paranoia turned feral. He no longer trusted anyone. Not the shadows that danced on his apartment walls, not the laughter of children outside, and certainly not the men who called themselves his partners. He'd wake in a cold sweat, convinced someone had been in his room, whispering his name. His nights were plagued by hallucinations, the faces of his victims, pale and accusing, floating just beyond the edge of his vision. He started carrying scalpels like talismans, muttering incoherent prayers to no god in particular. When the Mafia finally sent a message Kane couldn't ignore, it was delivered with brutal clarity. A severed hand, carefully packed in ice, was left outside his door, a hand he recognized as belonging to his one remaining ally, a cleaner who had helped him cover his tracks. A note was tucked beneath it: "Your debts are ours now. Pay in full, or you're next." Driven to a fever pitch by fear and addiction, Kane began to lose his grip on reality. Every knock at the door, every footstep in the hallway, became a death sentence in his mind. He barricaded himself in his decrepit apartment, the walls papered with frantic, scribbled notes. He began hearing voices in the static of his television, voices that mocked his failures and promised his impending doom. The Mafia wasn't just hunting him anymore. His own mind had joined the chase. And yet, Kane wasn't sure which would claim him first: the mob's hitman, or the darkness he felt growing inside him, pulling him deeper into an abyss of guilt, fear, and madness. He started hiding in illegal dens, dragging along women he paid to keep quiet about his frantic behavior. One of these women, Lisa, was different. She had a personal vendetta. Her best friend had disappeared after a night with Kane, and Lisa suspected she had fallen victim to his monstrous deeds. Lisa's tip-off to the police set Kane's downfall in motion. One freezing midnight, the authorities stormed his decrepit motel. What they found was a scene ripped from a horror film. Kane, high on cocaine, slumped beside a suitcase of counterfeit cash. Guns, needles, and vials littered the floor. The centerpiece of the room was a blood-stained cooler packed with severed organs, carefully preserved for delivery. Lisa stood in a corner, trembling but alive. The stench of death clung to the air. Under the harsh lights of the interrogation room, Kane broke. He confessed to everything: the tortures, the murders, the surgeries performed on living victims. He spoke of the Mafia's orders, of the bodies left cold in casino backrooms, and of the dark satisfaction he found in his work as his humanity withered away. But the Mafia disowned him, erasing every trace of their involvement. Kane was a loose end, and they had no intention of letting him survive to incriminate them further. As Kane awaited trial in solitary confinement, the full weight of his sins crashed down on him. Each night, the cries of his victims echoed in his cell. He saw faces, gaunt, lifeless, and staring. Whispers turned into screams, driving him into the depths of madness. One morning, guards arrived to find his cell empty. Blood smeared the walls, forming cryptic, jagged words: "Debt paid." The official story was that Kane escaped, but those who worked the prison swore they saw something unnatural that night, a shadow dragging itself across the floor, whispering names. The legend of Dr. Victor Kane spread like wildfire. The Grand Horizon Casino shuttered its doors, and his old hospital mysteriously burned to the ground. Some Mafia bosses were arrested, others vanished. Gamblers spoke in hushed tones about a ghostly figure haunting the back rooms of casinos, his bloodied hands reaching for those desperate enough to take shortcuts. Those who claimed to have seen him say his eyes are hollow, and his whispers chill to the bone: "Your gamble, my scalpel." "Hold on tight," because you're about to enter a world of pure terror. Hit that subscribe button now and ring the bell if you dare. You wouldn't want to miss these spine-chilling updates. Think you're brave enough? Then go ahead, choose the video on my right or maybe the one on my left. But beware, these aren't just stories. They're nightmares that will stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Not everyone makes it through. So, viewer discretion advised, only the fearless will survive the terror waiting within.